Hi, my name is Sergey Gusev. Welcome to my channel. I continue talking about drawing, painting and composition. And today I will show you how to paint a portrait of a small girl in oils on canvas. I'm not going to make any under-drawing or under-painting, and will start from blocking in, using all the colors from my palette. But before I start, please subscribe to my channel, and you won't miss out on my new videos. Find me on Instagram and Facebook. Visit my webpage to download the full video tutorials or get individual online classes in painting to develop your skills. Okay, I think we are ready to start off, so let's begin. So let's look at my palette. You see that I have only 7 colors on the palette. Usually I use a limited palette. I use titanium white, cadmium lemon, cadmium red, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, raw umber and ultramarine. So let's mix ochre, umber and add a little burnt sienna. As a medium, I'm gonna use odorless thinner. And I got a white bristle brush in my hand for the initial sketch. As I'm not gonna make any underdrawing or underpainting, I start blocking in right away. I use all the colors from my palette. But first of all, I'm gonna outline the composition, the overall silhouette of the head, neck, shoulders. I outline the silhouette of the entire figure with a few lines. Now we do think about the details and think more about the spots. We can add a little more burnt sienna and more medium. So it's gonna be more convenient to paint with big spots. You can block in the backgrounds, immediately surround the head with it. Draw a little, correct the shape of the head. Paint the shadow on the face, neck. As we do make the underpainting, we can use white right from the beginning and mix the color for the light part of the face. If you watched my previous videos, you remember that in the beginning I don't recommend painting details. Try to start from the big proportions and composition. I mean, make sure that the head is not too big or too small, and it is closer to the center of the canvas. After you make sure that the composition is quite correct, and the proportions are correct too, you can start specifying the details of the head. The eye sockets and nose. At this stage, we don't draw. We work with spots. And when we don't make an underdrawing, we don't think about the details at all. We will deal with the details at the end. Draw them more carefully when we find the right tonal and color relationships. Now we're simply thinking about lights and shadows, and painting the big spots. Remember that in this case we have a cold light source. So the light part will be also cold, and the shadows will be warm. We also have quite a strong and very warm reflection in the shadow. In this case, the difference between lights and shadows is very visible. The light is very cold, quite bluish, and the shadow is very warm. There is ochre and cadmium lemon. Now I'm painting the light on the forehead. It is very cold. I mixed white, added cadmium red, ultramarine, and quite a bit of cadmium lemon. I'm still using a white bristle brush. It's quite convenient to paint with it at the beginning to cover up large planes. It is better not to start painting with synthetics, because synthetics soften brushstrokes very much. And in the beginning, it is important for us to paint rougher, to clarify the construction of the head. Somewhere you can use a rag, smudge the background a little. Keep it all as a spot. We still don't care much about the details. Beginners usually like to concentrate on one detail, copy it, and then when they start working on another part, it turns out to be in the wrong place. We finish the details at the end. We don't start from finishing details. We start with big relationships, large color and tonal spots. Outline the eyes, also just a spot. Somewhere we work on the surroundings. At the beginning we work on the entire surface of the canvas and don't concentrate on any particular detail. Please note that the further cheek and cheekbone will be warmer because it is further away from the light source. And the other cheek and cheekbone will be quite cold because it is closer to the light source. As you can see, I am painting quite thick. I don't use the thinner in this stage. In general, I don't like to use mediums. And usually I use it at the very beginning to sketch a composition and block in large spots to see the composition better. And I use it at the end, when it is necessary to finish the very small details with a small pointed synthetic. Now I'm adjusting the shape of the eyes, lips. I'm working more closely on the details. But I still keep all of them in the spot. I don't concentrate on any detail. And I also start working more closely on the resemblance. After you worked on the face, you can paint the background. Slightly darken it. Work on the surroundings. You can mix paints directly on the canvas with a white brush. Add ochre, then sienna, and a little ultramarine, quite impasto. As I said in the beginning, we can slightly strengthen the color and tonal relationships, because usually beginners like to make colors dirty. So it makes sense to paint with brighter ones in the beginning. So you can make the shadow even brighter than it is. Add more ochre and cadmium lemon into the reflection. And at the end, if it looks too bright, we can always glaze it. So it will become a little darker and less bright. When you are working on the background, it's very important not just to paint it separately from the head, but first of all also correct the shape of the head, adjust the silhouette, and secondly soften the edges of the shape. So don't make the head look like a cutout. Don't make the edges too hard. Remember that there is air surrounding the form, and there is space. So the edges always get softer when they get further away from us. We can't paint the nose, that is in the foreground, and the hair, which is in the background, equally sharp. The edges and borders of the shape should merge with the backgrounds. This way we will create a convincing sense of space. If you look at the works of great artists, old masters, or masters of the second half of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, you will see that they painted very softly and avoided hard edges. Sometimes they put strong accents into the eyes because the eyes is a very important detail and our attention is concentrated around this detail. But the rest of the face or figure they painted very softly, a little immersion with the background. And thus we perceive the first plan and the most important details of the head better. All the secondary things we can paint very softly, especially the edges of the form. Many beginners paint them too hard. Literally cut out the silhouette. but we have to create a three-dimensional image on a two-dimensional surface of the canvas. So remember to paint everything very softly. Now I'm blocking in the clothes with a wide flat bristle brush. I start from the shadows. It is always more convenient to paint from a dark spot. The eye perceives better the dark colors. It is easier to understand and feel the color. So it always makes sense to start with the shadows, especially the face. I keep on saying that it's very difficult to get light semitones on a white canvas. So it makes sense to surround the head with darks. You can use the background, clothes, hair. It also works for the clothes. Block in the shadow first, and then it's going to be easier to find the right color for the light part. Though in my opinion it's always more convenient to work almost at the same time over lights and shadows. Don't try to paint a shadow first, finish it, find all the reflections, soften the edges, and then start working on the light. Try to block in both almost at the same time. Spend a minute or two on the shadow and immediately paint the light next to it. Literally, 2-3 rough brush strokes are enough to see how right or wrong the tone and color are, how much darker the shadow is than the light. Remember, the shadow will always be warmer when the light source is cold, and the light is colder than the shadow. This tonal and color difference you see much better when you have light and shadow next to each other on the canvas. Now the first part of the painting is coming to the end. We outline the composition and proportions. Blocked in the lights quite thick. Worked on the shadows. We already have big tonal relationships. And now we can devote more time to the likeness. Draw the details, correct the form. So let's do it. Now I'm working a little on the eyes. I draw the iris, pupil, reflection in the iris. You can take a soft synthetic and draw. In my videos I talked a lot about how to draw the eye. And this time I will repeat again that the eye is a very complex shape. Probably this is the most complex form in the head, in the portrait. Quite complex and expressive detail. And of course, when we paint eyes, we need to understand which details it consists of. Because if we don't, we'll make many mistakes. Usually, to understand the construction, we need to make a lot of sketches and longer studies. Usually, to understand the construction, we need to make a lot of sketches and longer studies. And very often beginners draw the eyes of David's sculpture by Michelangelo. This is quite a big form. The details are very visible. You can see the iris pupil, see the spherical shape of the eye and the eye socket. Therefore, usually in art schools, this is a basic task before drawing a live portrait. They study the details of a plaster head, make long drawings, short sketches, and so on. So if you have any questions, of course you can take a book on anatomy, read it, understand the anatomy of the eye, but you won't learn how to draw. So to understand how to draw the eye, you have to literally draw it. Draw the cast of the eye in different angles, with different light. Actually, it is a very interesting task. You can even buy a cast. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It will help you in studying anatomy a lot. All the great artists started from drawing plaster models before drawing a live figure. Plaster casts don't have a color. They're simply white, and all the tonal changes are very visible. Even the smallest changes are very well seen. And when we draw a live head, a portrait, we have to deal with colors. Facial expression of a model changes, and it is a bit difficult for beginners to catch the resemblance, proportions, the color and tone. Therefore, they draw first plaster heads, lit with contrast light. So the shape doesn't move at all. Everything is very constant, and you can spend a lot of time to draw those plaster casts. So, if there is an opportunity to draw, or at least go to a museum and find some sculptures, not necessarily plaster, maybe in marble, where there is no color, where you can only think about tonal values and construction, it would be a very good task for you, because we learn from experience. We can look at pictures, read books, but in order to learn how to draw, you have to draw by yourself. Getting close to the end, I correct some small details, halftones, soften edges, and don't forget that in the end it's very important to put tonal accents. Don't be afraid of tonal accents. Beginners are usually afraid of tonal accents, but tone is very important for creating volume and space. Remember that the shadows will always be darker than the lights, and this difference is very visible. Even if we don't have direct sunlight, the tonal difference is always very well seen. So at the end, make sure that those accents exist. Make sure that the shadow in the eye socket will be one of the darkest, because it is closer to the light source than the other shadows. Make sure that the shadows in the nostrils are dark enough. The light doesn't get in there. At the end, we check out the entire surface of the canvas, making sure that the portrait is alike, softening the form where it goes away from us. Remember that the nose will always be in the foreground. All the other parts of the head will be slightly further away, so we paint them softer. Don't forget that it is important having not only dark accents but also light ones, the highlights, or just light semitones. Usually they are on the surface of the forehead, because the forehead is very close to the source of light, which comes from above, making the cheek, forehead, and nose very light and cold. At the very end, you can work more carefully over the eyes. Draw the irises. Reflection in the irises. Remember that the outline of the iris will be darker than its inner part. And also when you put highlights in the eyes, don't forget that they lie on the surface of the cornea. The cornea is a dome-like transparent shape. We don't see it, but we see the highlight on its surface. It's not on the pupil or iris, but on the cornea. So the edges of the highlight will always be sharp, strong, because firstly it is closer to us, the pupil and the iris are further away, and secondly the surface of the cornea is glossy, and highlights on glossy surfaces are always very sharp. They have hard edges. If we look for example at the forehead, there is also a highlight, but it is not visible because it is matte. It blends with the light semitones around, unlike on glossy surfaces where the highlights are very clearly seen. They are always very bright and sharp, and their edges are very clear and strong. At the very end, I work only with a small synthetic with a pointed tip. It's very convenient to draw some very small details with it. I think after I finish working over the eyes, this portrait can be completed. Of course, we can always find some smaller details, but remember that we are not creating a copy. We are working on an art piece. Therefore, it's very important for us to keep the portrait fresh, lively, sketchy, and a little bit unfinished. We don't have to paint absolutely everything we see. Now let's look closer at the textures and brush strokes on the surface of the canvas. I think it's quite interesting for you to see it closed up. You see that the layer of paints is quite thick. I think that at this stage I'm gonna stop working on this portrait. You have just watched my tutorial. I hope it was interesting and inspiring for you. Thumbs up if you like it. You can help me out and share this video with your friends on your favorite social network. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Find me on Instagram and Facebook. Also visit my webpage to download the full video tutorials or get individual online classes in painting. I wish you good luck with your artworks, guys, and see you next week.